I will start streaming now, and then I will tweet it out, and you'll be tagged in the tweet at least. There it goes. Awesome. And tweet. And hopefully all my bits hold up a little better than last time. There's something about like 10:05 p.m. That I think that must be when everyone in my neighborhood decides to start watching Netflix or something. So,
good point. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So who knows? Anyway, we'll wait on a few folks to hop on. Got any new gigs going on?
No, right now, NBC, I've got Forbes and still hot with the motorsports analytics and POSREG stuff. Yeah. So right now the dance card is full. I do like to keep busy, take advantage of job offers when they come. But yeah, right now it's things are pretty busy, but going very well.
That's cool. You know, I got a new phone recently. Me and Sherwin both did. It was kind of funny. Same weekend. But my old phone just it was getting to the point where like it was only quote unquote 16 gig. It was an iPhone 5S. Okay. it was old. This guy right here. And so anyway, whole point was it wasn't good at playing podcasts anymore because it would like fill up the hard drive on it pretty quickly with all the photos and everything else I had. So now I've got like a 256 gig or something like that. And so I've been trying to find out like, that's right, I used to listen to this podcast and this podcast. So I've been catching up on them. And then when I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago when Sherwin said, we got David Smith coming on. I'm like, oh yeah, Positive Progression. I got to go download that. Shoot. So I've been trying to catch up.
It's a rabbit hole. We've been shocked by the number of people that have approached us and said that they will listen well after the fact. It's pretty shocking because we have, race previews on there. But people seem to really enjoy it and going back and listening and plunging through the archives. So I don't know, we may have stumbled onto something.
Yeah. I think sometimes like if I had an intern or something that could go back and listen to like, because so much of our show is just what's going on in the now, but some of it is just us telling goofy stories that really should be clipped somewhere and be part of the library there of silly content that we have. Because going back and listening to like the Charlotte race from 2017, like it's probably not interesting, but some story about in that same podcast about how we went and got drunk and did something stupid might be fun.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's, we've really had a lot of focus on just having evergreen segments that folks don't mind going back and listening to. Mm-hmm. So we have deliberately done that when we can. It is very difficult to do, especially for a stats podcast because stats change weekly. Mm-hmm. But when we have done it, it's been pretty successful. So it might be worth your while to clip some of your, best of PETM one day.
Yeah.
Some of it's probably in what we consider to be the after dark.
Yeah, right.
That might have to live on YouTube forever as opposed to in some sort of Apple podcast form. It tends to get, although lately we've been pretty well behaved, I suppose. But language can get a little dressed up over there. A little bit more George Carlin-y.
Okay. Gentlemen, are we ready to get started?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, let's
roll.
Do it. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and hit record, and then I'll do all the intros as usual. Bring you on, David. This is your PhD episode. So
okay, that's exciting.
Yeah, as we call it. We got the bachelors and masters, and here we are, third time around, I believe. So anyway,
okay, awesome.
Off we go. We're recording now. Welcome, y'all! That's right. This is the Pregame Engineer Tug Air Racing Podcast, episode number 291. It's Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. I'm Tug Air Rusty Wallace here in the PTM Podcast Studio in Atlanta, Georgia. The PTN podcast is sponsored by you. That's right. You go to patreon.com/PTN. Join the What You Drink Club for as little as $1 a month. Get that free koozie. Get some stickers. Best part is every cent this year we're donating to sponsoring drivers. So join the PTN posse today. Be a part of the sport you love. This week's show brought to you by our official sponsors at the $5 and up per month level. I already had to take a breath there, so let's see if we can get it. Here we go. Aaron Bearden, Robert Kevlin, Coleman, Claire, Matt Kevin, Ryan Kiefer, Patrick Cleary, Jeff Brown, Brennan Crowd, Kathy McDonald, Brandon Carl, Ricky Porter, Julie Bozzi, Edward Greer III, Yonker Motorsports, David Mullins, Patrick Johnson, Brett Morris, Crystal Smoke, Fred Rosado, Chad Knapp, and Stacey Coleman, Lisa Chinana, Rick Houston, Sarah and Barry, Evan Roller, Matthew Bishop, Perry Bolzania, AJ Villan, AJ Evangelista, Janet Scott, Les Miller, and Jumpy Bob. Woo! All right. I got 15 names in a woo, Sherwin.
That's not bad.
I dig it. I say 15. That's more like 25 or 30, something. So thank you, PTM Posse, and everybody hanging out on the YouTube channel, everybody listening in afterwards and everything else. So appreciate y'all being here. I've already mentioned him from the PTM North Carolina studio, pregame engineer Andrew Sherwin. How you doing, man?
It's heating up here, man. I tell you what.
Man, I will tell you what. I don't know what happened. We'll talk about the weather here in a moment. Let's go ahead and bring on our guest tonight. He made his last appearance on PTM 247 almost a year ago. That was right about when we figured out that, like, this whole quarantine thing, that's going to be a little more than just a couple weeks, isn't it? So he's a NASCAR writer and analyst, co-host of the Positive Regression Podcast, owner of Motorsports Analytics. He's on Twitter at David Smith, M.A. It's David Smith. What's up, David?
Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing great. We mentioned in the pre-show, just before hitting that record button, that it's your PhD episode, third time on the show. So I don't have any fanfare queued up. So apologies for that, but
that's okay. It's exciting enough,
right?
It sounds amazing.
Well, it's on multiple people's resumes at this point on their LinkedIn. It's like awards and certifications. I'm a licensed and trained physician, and I am a PTM PhD. It goes a long way.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a LinkedIn account, so I've got to find a spot to put that. Yeah, that's good. That's right up there. I appreciate
resume
it.
builders, man. And, in this economy, you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a multi-gig economy, right?
Yeah. I feel like that's something you can say at any point and make yourself sound smart. I've read like if you're talking with people who know sports and you don't know sports, you can say these phrases and that'll work. But if you want to sound smart, you can go, well, in today's economy, and then just say anything. It doesn't matter. So
something totally bat crazy, but it's already been solidified because of what you prefaced it with. That's perfect.
Right. Well, David, it is your PhD episode, so you know how we start this thing. What you drinking tonight?
I am going a Weller 107, fun bottle of bourbon. I tend to go neat when it comes to bourbon, but I actually went 2 ice cubes tonight. I do that with higher proof bourbons, just because it gets a little too hot on your tongue and you want that taste to pop. So I want to taste something as I'm sitting and talking with you two gentlemen.
Well, I do it too when it's time, or when it's this hot out that Sherwin mentioned. It was like whatever it was 2 weeks ago, perfect weather for like camping. Me and the wife went camping and stuff, and it was in the high 40s overnight and 70 during the day, 65 to 70, perfect hiking weather. Everything was perfect. And then suddenly 90 plus degrees. And I'm telling you, this is what Southern slow, this is where this comes from. Like I felt everything slow down. I don't know about y'all, but like I'm walking outside and it's 95 degrees this week, and it was 70 last week. Last week I'm walking around pretty quick and got to get where I'm going. This week I'm like, I ain't no hurry. Are you kidding me? Sherwin, how about you?
Same. I mean, I'm guilty of being something of a hermit on the weekends, but I was like, I'll open up the door, let some fresh air in here while I'm watching all this racing and rain, and it's sunshiny here in North Carolina, and I open the door and I go, nah. Shut the door, turn the AC down 2 more degrees.
Right before I started the show, I mashed the AC button about 4 or 5 times. Like, it is too damn hot in here, and I'm gonna be sweating my butt off trying to do the podcast with all these lights on me, because if I turn off these lights, now it looks like I'm in the dark. Which, I mean, there's a light in here, but it's not doing a whole lot. So, light ourselves up. There it is. And I got this fancy clicker too, so I get to this that deal. But Yeah, yeah. So slowing it down a little bit. You slowing down any, David? You still on the gas?
Very much on the gas. Actually, this will be my first race weekend that I'm attending since Daytona this weekend. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to the hot weather. Although Sunday's Coke 600 looks interestingly chilly. As it dips down into nighttime, we should see temps about 51 to 55 degrees. So a lot of grip, a lot of speed. This might be a tire wear race, so that could be a pretty big factor. But I'm looking forward to all of that. I embrace it. It's long overdue return to the racetrack for me.
Well, that's fantastic, and I'm jealous of the people who will be camping at the race this weekend because, once again, great weather there. Sherwin, I did skip you. What are you drinking tonight yourself?
Well, I still got some leftover Texas beer from the weekend. Shiner Bock.
Well done.
Always a nice, tasty little beer.
Well done. Well, I'm gonna sound fancy here or whatever, but it was kind of funny the way my wife put it. So I flew out to Athens, Georgia this weekend, met up with some friends, went out to lunch, hung out for a bit, walked around the town, and flew back. But while I was there, Creature Comforts is right there in the middle of downtown. So I stopped there, and my wife called it the most expensive beer run in history. Aviation fuel's not cheap, but
easily.
But they've got a coffee stout here. It's 8%, so it'll get you, it'll get you primed and ready. But it's pretty good. Creature Stout. And I got some couple of other things that they don't sell, like, they don't distribute. So got a good little, I don't know, $50 assortment there. So looking forward to it.
To add to, and not to cut you off, but to add to what David's drinking, I am almost positive when I went to New Orleans that Weller's was one of the ones that we had. Now, obviously, for those who've been to New Orleans, you know that you can't breathe without tripping over a bar that's slammed full of bourbon. And, I'm sure we were probably in some basement type thing that was like a cellar or something, who knows? But I remember having Weller's. I don't know which one of them we had, but that's definitely that's way up the list in Juliet's repertoire. She's a bourbon connoisseur, so I was just go with the flow.
I bet you paid a pretty penny for it too.
Well,
at a bar.
Yeah, I was I'm blessed to not know a lot about what things cost while I was there. I'm not saying they're necessarily just rolling in the dough or anything, but they were very gracious guests, and I have no idea. I imagine at some point I was probably holding a tumbler with two fingers or something that probably cost $60 an ounce if I had to guess. I mean, it was good.
That's what's wild on most bourbons. I mean, the markup is going to be just incredible, but this retails at less than $30 a bottle. The problem is you can't find it. That's the caveat. So
scarcity is part of the game.
Yeah.
Let's go meta here. Talk about podcasting for a moment. We both have things to celebrate. David, PETM podcast was named the #1 podcast in the world by my own mother. And at the same time, y'all were named a top 20 analytics podcast by Welt Magazine. So, well, one of those probably carries more weight in the world, but I like mine quite a bit. But
you know what? I don't know if my mom has ever listened to Positive Regression. So there you go. You might have a leg up on me for that. I'd say that's pretty good. Pretty high praise. Yeah. Oh yeah. This little podcast that Alan Cavana and I do on a weekly basis, just a nerdy NASCAR podcast, seems to be recognized. So that's great. And we recently hit our 100th episode, which for me was a milestone because of just the effort that has gone into building it and getting myself to at least a respectable point of podcast editing. I have immense, immeasurable respect for audio engineers now, knowing what I don't know. So yeah, I mean, we're now in our third year, and it's been great. We recently joined the Blue Wire Network. We're the only NASCAR pod on that network. So we've been excited. We really have. For both Alan and I, it's opened doors to gigs that we probably didn't even think were on our radar. So it's been good in that respect.
That's really cool. What's been some highlights over the last few weeks or month or so? Recent stuff y'all been doing over there?
Recently, we actually had we talked about who is a serious championship contender. And it wasn't your normal hot take conversation. I think Alan and I both hit on the same things. This isn't really about season long strength. We saw that with Kevin Harvick last year. We might be seeing it with Kyle Larson this year. The championship is given to the winner of a contest designed by NASCAR, where they place 10 races at the end of the year. And some of these races have more prominence than others. And if you are not good in those races or at those tracks, then you are not a serious title contender. So that's kind of where the conversation dovetailed. I know it's a little bit different from probably the normal NASCAR discussion, the things that you'll see on Reddit. But that's kind of the things that we embrace. We let our stat wonkiness kind of guide us in different directions than what you'd ordinarily hear on other podcasts or on Sirius Radio or even during the telecasts. And we're okay with that. We've carved out our niche and we really enjoy our niche.
Yeah. That's fantastic. You know, that slides right into the next thing I was going to ask you, because we love talking numbers here and a couple of what we've called nerd necks many times. But we know some of the easy numbers, right? There's 268 wins for Hendrick. We've had 11 different winners this season now, if I counted correctly. What are some of the more surprising stats for you right now that you're seeing? And does that play into, some of this championship stuff you were talking about?
Well, it does and it doesn't. I think some of the surprising things that we've seen have come from drivers that maybe we thought were good, but we didn't anticipate them being this good. One of them being William Byron. He ranks second in production and equal equipment rating. The top 10 streak, the win at Homestead, all plays into that. He was always on an above average Cup Series driver trajectory, but this season he's hit an entirely different level. All of his underlying numbers seem to support, and they did this in previous years, but they really seem to support what he's doing is realistic. To see him at 23 jump to this level is thoroughly impressive. And so much so, I'm actually working on a column that'll appear on Forbes later this week, but the value that he's driven up for himself, what he produced last season was roughly at a $2 million a year salary pace. He's now up to he's turned himself into a $5 million a year driver. Wow. His contract ends after 2022, the same time Chase Elliott ends. So all of this Hendrick Motorsports dominance that we're seeing, they are soon going to have to pay a lot of money to maintain that. And I find that part fascinating. And then just the little nuggets that we like to talk about, like of all of the drivers in terms of production equal equipment rating in races that end with at least one late race restart, the best driver in the series is Matt DiBenedetto. Blows your mind. And he has established himself as an elite restarter. That is very much his identity in this series, but the manner in which it is dictating his race finish is incredible. And that's kind of the fun stuff that we like to discover, because some of this isn't easily perceived when watching races on television. We've talked about this before. Every other sport, football, basketball, baseball, you're going to see all of the action in front of you on your TV screen. You miss a lot when it comes to watching any form of racing. But those little things, we're missing talents. We're missing skills. And all of these drivers have different skill sets that pop in different moments. So doing this podcast, having motorsports analytics, and being able to write on these sort of things hopefully allows my readers to appreciate these drivers in a different way, because they might not be competing for outright wins, and they might not get the traditional media coverage that you would expect for winning drivers to get, but they've carved their own niche into the sport, and they're having a lot of success with it. So that's, for me, that's the cool part.
That's probably been one of the things that has most interested me in reading your stuff and listening to the podcast with Alan, is where you go and find some of that unique information, like what you talked about with what's coming up with Forbes. Is, okay, so how do I place a value? Well, I have to go compare some period of time where this person was worth this, and this is why maybe they were, and you grade that, maybe a tiered system that you ultimately apply some actual dollar value to. But to say that William Byron has taken him, has basically increased his value by 2.5 times what it was before the season started. How much do you have to grade into it? It's pretty obvious that in the off season, Hendrick Motorsports as a whole has found a way to increase value for all its drivers by finding some speed that they didn't have until maybe the last 4, 5, 6 races last year.
Yeah. I mean, that all plays into it. At least just in regards to the values, it's based on production and equal equipment rating. So it's applying a monetary value. I have been afforded the opportunity to talk with team decision makers, driver agents, folks on both sides of the negotiating table. So I have a pretty thorough, I think, understanding of what driver values are. For a few drivers, I know precisely what they are paid. So just with those little facts and understanding what drivers are actually producing on the racetrack, we can quantify the worth of what they do every Sunday. Now, we can't get into whether they're bringing sponsorship, and if they do, that increases their value. If they can garner merchandise sales and sponsorship, a lot of what Chase Elliott's pay is going to be. He's incredible on the track. He's already a champion, but also he had the highest first day merch sales after a champion in NASCAR in the last 10 years. So someone, willing to move merchandise, be that recognizable name, there's a value to that as well. When he goes to the negotiating table, probably next summer and maybe sooner than that, he's going to have a ton of leverage. I don't think he's going to go anywhere, but he's going to push that note across the table, and he can almost name a pretty sky high number and get it. So it's kind of understanding those inner workings. I know that there's no drivers union. There's nothing that's going to drive these kind of dollar figures being out there in the public like they are for other sports. I find that fascinating, not the how much is someone getting paid, but how we quantify what drivers are doing. Because, I'd like to know if we can for certain understand whether a driver is vastly underpaid or he's performing beyond what was expected of him and what that value increase actually is, because I think that's a side plot, storyline that a lot of people would enjoy hearing about.
I totally agree. More pressing contract stuff for Hendrick is Alex Bowman coming up. I'm curious where you place him on that spectrum. And we talked about it last week, considering the win over Dover. And, if that pumped the numbers a little bit, like, hey, we were already talking contract, but, now I'm a winner.
So that's interesting. I'm curious I'm curious what you guys would think about that win at Dover, but at least statistically, Alex Bowman, he scored an adjusted pass efficiency of 33.33%. It is, since I started tracking that metric in 2014, the lowest adjusted pass efficiency of a NASCAR Cup Series race winner. So, Was that an ordinary win? I know that we can recall that Kyle Larson went out and dominated that day. Hendrick Motorsports as a whole was very good. Chase Elliott came from the rear of the field to score stage points in the first stage. They brought the heat that day. They deserved their 1, 2, 3, 4 finish. But in regards to Bowman, it's tough because of those 4 drivers. It seems that he is the driver most likely to be replaced if they were looking to do that. They've had opportunities. They've had Brad Keselowski display some interest. They've had Eric Jones come available. They would have Matt DiBenedetto this season, who has a higher open market value than Bowman, but they're sticking with the familiar face from the sounds of it. And what that allows them to do, Bowman's probably a little bit over he's well over a $2 million driver. He's probably very nearly a $3 million driver, but not splurging on a bigger name, like not going after Brad Keselowski, probably gives them enough financial flexibility to retain Elliott and Byron in the same year. And probably because from the sounds of it, Kyle Larson has a contract with incentives, the ability to pay that contract out, because those are likely incentives Kyle Larson's going to hit if he keeps performing the way he's performing. So even though is he the most attractive free agent on the table? No, not by far. But his place at Hendrick allows Hendrick to continue being Hendrick, and therefore they understand what his value brings specifically to them.
Boy, I feel like I'm getting like some clairvoyance here. This is that's good stuff. I love that. How often do you think teams are using your stats? Like, well, your pass efficiency rating was the worst of that I've been measuring it, or maybe we're not looking to break any NDAs here, but have you worked with teams in terms of any of the stats stuff? I'm just curious.
I get yelled at weekly if my plan your restart stats aren't updated before competition meetings. I'm sorry, I've got a lot on my plate. I try to get it done Monday or Tuesday. Things happen. But yeah, no, teams, drivers have been supportive. There are a lot of patrons within the industry, which I appreciate. That gives me some validity that folks within the sport actually use what I write, use the stats that I create or track in their competition meetings and kind of their daily discussions. I know that Denny Hamlin is he's been pretty vocal about it, that he's a believer, so much so that he brought up the restart stats when discussing the need for a choose rule. So that was pretty neat, pretty surreal. But also on some of these numbers and these metrics, I've reached out to the industry. I haven't been bashful about that. And I'm very lucky that, it's a sport filled with engineers, and engineers know cars and they know math and they understand what I'm trying to do. So they're willing to offer that helping hand and maybe point me in a direction that's they know would be useful to them. And it just so happens that a lot of NASCAR fans find it interesting as well. So I'm appreciative of that.
What's interesting to me is and I wouldn't say they're diabolically opposed. That's probably a little bit too graphic of an adjective or adverb, whichever we're looking at. But this, on the same token that your metrics might allow a driver to show up at the table with negotiating power for a base salary.
Yeah.
And then whatever their potential contribution for merchandise sales that would end up rolling back into the overall team fund. The team can actually take some of those same metrics and go to the sponsor and say, this is the kind of value that our team, our engineers, our car builders, our talent, including the driver, can bring to you as a sponsor. And so we think your sponsorship should increase by X. Or we're going to keep you where you're at, but you're now going to get a smaller chunk of the car.
Could be.
Who would you consider? So you're starting up a team. You're going to have 4 cars. You have a fairly limited budget. So you can't just get the superstars. But what's like the Billy Bean, Oakland Athletics, Sabermetrics, Mount Rushmore for you of undervalued, overperforming drivers in 2021?
I don't even know if I would start with drivers. I think I'd go crew chief first,
Wow.
or competition department first, because there's one driver I was talking with last week. He said, as a hypothetical, if he was making $3 million a year, he knew if he could get the best crew chief in the garage, he would willingly give up half.
Wow.
And that's, for those guys, that's the difference. If you consider who's are you seeing who's running 20th to 25th right now? It's Eric Jones, a former truck champion, Daniel Suarez, a former Xfinity champion, Eric Almirola, Chase Briscoe, who won 9 Xfinity races last year, Ross Chastain's back there. That's good racing, and those are good drivers, and they're essentially stuck back there because the car won't go any faster, really. And when you think about that, all of those guys, all those drivers are good. They bring something, it's at least one something to the table. What it boils down to is a car that has a handling balance and is fast and has mechanical grip and aero and everything that you need right now in the modern day Cup Series. And only so few teams are achieving that. And when you consider what happens in a NASCAR race, it's almost like the rich get richer. Even when you're coming down to pit road, who pits first? The leaders. They get the clean entry and exit onto and off of pit road. They don't have to worry about lap traffic or any kind of traffic early on their run. So they don't, we talk about these restarts being wild with the 550 package. Drivers of clean air don't have to worry about that. So that initial speed, and mind you, that's the most correlative metric with success in stock car racing, but that offers so many advantages while masking all the deficiencies. So if you get that right, if you build the car, if you're going to pour all of your money into the car, that's when you can begin to play Moneyball with who's actually driving it. And I think at that point, there's different horses for different courses as you dive down into the 20th, 25th, 30th place range in the Cup Series. Those guys are really good. Even down to Xfinity and trucks. I know it's a mess at times in some of those races, but you're going to find talent that's at least capable of taking a fast car in clean air and aero blocking their way to a good finish.
That's a really cool way to look at it. How about, what is your Mount Rushmore then of crew chiefs? Where would you start?
Currently, I mean, it's tough to argue against Gabe Hart and Childers based on what we saw from them last year, just mechanically in terms of getting their cars to compete at every style of racetrack. But also strategically, they were, I mentioned Bowman had essentially a negative pass differential when he won Dover. Well, that was the same with Harvick when he won Indianapolis. Harvick did not pass for the lead to win the race at Indianapolis. But Rodney Childers put him in that kind of position to benefit when Denny Hamlin popped that tire. And to the same respects, we saw that from Hamlin. We saw it from Greg Ives with Alex Bowman at times last year. The Coca-Cola 600 last year, Greg Ives made the decision. He recognized that tire wear was minimal. He made a 2-tire call after the caution for rain, and Bowman jumped from 13th to 1st, where he aero blocked his way to 2-stage victories. That was a masterful call. I think they finished outside the top 10 in that race, but they went home with the 4th most points. So when you're doing those kind of things, you have to think, one, mechanically, you're building a car that can do these kind of things. And then you have to find a way to strategize your way towards the game that NASCAR has created for its teams. And some of these teams play that game better than others. So for a Rushmore, I'll stick with Gabe Hart and Childers because I think they're low hanging fruit. Greg Ives is a star. In my opinion, I think he might actually be the best of the Hendrick quartet right now. No ill will to Alan Gustafson, and for a fourth, it's a good question. James Small, because because we haven't seen anybody make they had the 16th fastest car in the first stage at Phoenix, and they had the fastest car in the final stage. I don't know too many crew chiefs that are diagnosing and pulling that off right now. So I think I'd want the Aussie on my team.
Interesting, because I always put Paul Wolf as one of my, if you will, Mount Rushmore guys. So I don't know if that backs up stats or anything else, but
he actually, I mean, internally in Penske, he is credited for a lot of their turnaround after the Kurt Busch, Ryan Newman eras. They kind of had a malaise a little bit when David Strenny was driving the 12, and then they signed Brad, and then they promoted Paul Wolf from the Xfinity series, and a lot of the protocols they have in house. I don't want to call it an assembly line, but a lot of the things they do now with their cars, Paul was the first one to do it, and it's kind of branched out. He's in that regard, Travis Geisler is the competition director, and by all accounts, he does a very good job. But it sounds like Paul is something of a shadow competition director, because a lot of his ideas translate onto the other cars. So he was significant in riding a ship at Penske that was just wayward for a while, head scratchingly bad.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, let's do this. Let's tear it down. Here we go. There's a sound effect, and here's the first period of the report card. Of course, we got to talk COTA, and Chase was there. Not a huge surprise, but David, I mean, that was like on your podcast on Positive Regression. It was just like, okay, is it Chase Elliott or Chase Elliott?
Yeah, I picked Chase. I didn't feel great about it. I don't want to see a rain out victory, and I don't like picking the easy name, but I think Hendrick as a whole thoroughly impressed. The disappointment that I had with COTA was not with the track itself, because I think that is an absolutely gorgeous facility. And I don't know if you guys follow IndyCar much, but that track's racy as hell. There's a lot of tire wear in IndyCar for that road course race, and it's kind of incredible to watch. And in speaking with drivers and some team members leading into COTA, whereas there was hesitation, trepidation into preparing for a dirt race at Bristol, there was none of that for COTA. Everyone was bought in. They knew what they wanted to do. They knew what they needed to work on before they got there. They were excited because there was going to be practice sessions and a traditional qualifying session. One driver told me that he had all 20 turns memorized. He could close his eyes and tell you what he wanted to do. That's how much time he spent preparing for it. So I'm disappointed that we didn't get to see that race play out. But even with everything that transpired, interesting to see Hendrick Motorsports rise to the occasion, even in the wet.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. First and foremost, for that race, we did get Matthew McConaughey, and he definitely started with all right. And that was we talked about it last show, that, yeah, come on, you got to. And he did. So I'll at least, give props where they're due. I was happy with that one. But Sherwin, let's start with this. Start with I'm trying to divorce or decouple the two topics of racing at COTA and racing in the rain. But that might not be possible in this case. But if we can, what was your thoughts on racing at COTA and and what we saw?
Well, I was genuinely excited, especially the more I got to look at what that racetrack is and how complicated it is compared to some of the other stuff that we do road course wise in NASCAR up until now. I mean, that 20 turns, like legit turns. What? And, you've got 185-mile-an-hour straightaway. I would have absolutely loved to see that play out under, well, if I'm being fair, I would like it to see go from a damp surface to a dry surface. But divorcing the rain from the equation, I guess we basically saw that Saturday afternoon with the Xfinity, and that's always going to be a little bit different, all things considered, and I'm sure we'll discuss that later. But I thought the venue itself is absolutely gorgeous. It feels like a place that NASCAR could find a good home. The the whole what makes Austin similar to Nashville, but not at all the same as Nashville, is pretty cool in a lot of ways. I thought, as much as I've kind of really poo-pooed Fox a little bit, not even a little bit at times, for the way they've approached this season, from a extraneous coverage perspective, I thought they crushed it for Austin. Getting getting all the different people involved, getting all the Austins involved. I thought that wasn't gimmicky at all to me. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Billy Gibbons, that whole thing, they did what you wanted them to do. And I think even the people of Austin who don't know anything about stock car racing would go, yeah, I think they did our city right. I think they did it right. Keep Austin weird.
Yep.
Keep Austin, red dirt country.
Yep. I love how different this one is, and we come from, we've called, they're almost officially called cookie cutter tracks. Your mile and a half D oval, and I feel like we almost could get into a trap where you can't tell one road course from another if we're going to so many road courses or whatever. But the uniqueness with this one, like you said, 20 turns, but we have a 185-mile-an-hour straightaway and another, damn near 180 miles an hour straightaway, and then 20 real turns and everything. I agree. I think this is a long-term home for NASCAR going forward. David?
The track itself has everything. You probably elevation too is huge.
Watkins Glen style. Yeah.
Martin Truex said that he enjoys tracks with elevation, and that's different than what we like the stadium road courses like the Roval and Daytona. It's good for filling the gap, but this is a legit course. And I think it tested and challenged some of these drivers, and to see some of these guys actually embrace, or at least try to embrace, what was happening in the wet. Even after the first practice, they brought in William Byron and Joey Logano to talk a little bit about their runs, and both enjoyed it. Logano talked, the visibility could be a problem, but this is driving in rain, something we can adjust to. And there were places on the track that the drivers knew where they wanted to initially hit their braking points, and they were having to adjust on the fly. So there was actually a lot of, just technical work at play. Unfortunately, it just didn't come to fruition the way that it deserved to. So I assume this isn't a temporary measure. The hope is on the schedule for years to come. And 20 legit turns. 5 of them were like crazy heavy left-handers where you actually had to drive it like an oval track a little bit. I hope it stays for a very long time.
So that's the race. Let's talk about the rain part. Of course, Harvick had plenty to say about it, but Harvick also didn't take home the trophy, so it's hard to say. And I've seen both sides of everything here. I feel like, but I don't know. For me, it felt like there's Sherwin. You said it earlier. There's damp, there's moist for Sidney Lett, but then there's We're racing in a lake here, and we can't see anything, and this is just silly. Where on that spectrum were we in y'all's thoughts?
I mean, for me personally, I don't. You don't know what you don't know. So for these drivers to be complaining, um, it should hold some significance. But it's not like the NASCAR had a pace car out there, right? They weren't seeing this firsthand. And even Michael McDowell said earlier today that it in that kind of situation, it's trial by fire, error. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And it's, from the sounds of it, certainly was an error. At the very least, Scott Miller from NASCAR said that, yeah, they probably waited too long to stop the race, which is, worlds different than the explanation for the Kansas tire debacle. So we're at least back to NASCAR owning their mistakes. So there's that. I know it doesn't, right any perceived wrongs, but it's something that if NASCAR is going to be going to more road courses and going to be utilizing a rain tire, then this was probably actually a very pivotal race for forming a future precedence for how those races are called. Just, it just happened to play out last Sunday where it didn't go well in a very big way. And grateful that no one was hurt, because if those guys couldn't see, that much was clear in the crashing, because those are some pretty vicious hits that we saw.
Yeah, I think where it would probably some of the data that's really going to come into play in how they approach these things going forward is the spotters saying, look, they didn't really put us in the right spots. They shouldn't have limited us to 3 when we all wanted 4, and we couldn't see, cars in some pretty pivotal places. But you know what? If they don't do that, they don't know. Now, granted, I'm of not just a theory, but having watched it, that we should have learned what can go wrong at Montreal about 10 or 11 years ago, because that's basically what we saw again. A little bit different kind of course, but similar in that, there was a lot of can't see going on, but it gets lost in the minutia because it's been so long since we did that, and it was a lesser series, so there's a way less eyeballs. It wasn't the first time we had raced at Montreal, Circuit Villeneuve, yada, yada, yada. This was all brand new, all eyes on board at Austin. And, they erred on the side of, well, let's see what happens, instead of, oh, no, let's put training wheels on this thing every time we get a chance. And then you walk away wondering, well, did we learn everything that we needed to learn? Well, it kind of feels like maybe they did learn everything they needed to learn, and perhaps they'll reevaluate for next time.
So I'll skip ahead a little bit here, and I do want to talk about playoffs for a minute, and I put this in before I thought about or before David, you had talked about what y'all had talked about last podcast and whatnot, but in the playoffs. And there's the classic stuff. You already said it. Hamlin looking, really good, obviously. He's first in points, and Mr. Consistent in that case. Byron being kind of the surprise, in terms of beginning of year. Maybe today we're not surprised every week when he's doing well. And Larson, seemingly a championship contender. But what's your I don't know, what's some of the TLDR on what you're talking about in terms of, here's who I'm looking at in the playoff picture.
I mean, the interesting one to me is Martin Truex and James Small. What they've done has been really interesting. So the 3 wins came on playoff tracks, including Martinsville, which is the cutoff for the final semifinal round, and then Phoenix. And when James Small, they brought him in after the race at Phoenix, he talked about the car's setup that he built with engineer Jeff Curtis. They were eliminated after, they had a good shot at winning Martinsville last fall, but they did not have a largesse of playoff points. So they were eliminated. They recognized that that was a problem. They needed more playoff points. James Small calls them bonus points, which is adorable. And then Phoenix, Truex had never won there prior to this year. They hadn't performed particularly well there lately. And the day they got back from Phoenix and back into the shop, they went to work on a Phoenix setup. And they had literally been working end of November, December, and January, getting ready for this spring Phoenix race just to see what they had. They didn't have practice. They didn't shake down anything. So James Small, they utilized the competition caution in the end of the first stage. That was essentially a practice session from them. Truex delivered fantastic feedback, knew exactly what he wanted, and they were able to tap in to the setup that they created. They optimized it. So when you break down what they've done, one, I mean, we've seen entire organizations, Penske in general, shifting towards specializing in 750 horsepower tracks because they think that's where the championships are won, and fair credit to them, they nearly pulled that off last year. But what Truex and this 19 team have done, they've actually just focused on 3 tracks and they nailed it. So if you break down how the playoff schedule runs out, it opens at Darlington. They've won there. The second stage or the second round includes races where things could go either way. It ends with the Roval. Truex can be formidable, sure, but he's going to have more playoff points, and they've talked about that being a focus, and that can get them through. Third round, whatever happens, it ends at Martinsville, and right now Truex feels pretty strongly about that, and he's the reigning Phoenix winner. So as the playoff schedule rolls out, that 19 team has done everything that it set out to do. And when you talk about crowning a champion based on the results of one race, having it be Phoenix, it sort of nullifies teams like Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick's team has not been good there lately. They used to have a firewall around that place that it is gone. Kyle Larson struggled there. Hendrick, I mean, Chase Elliott, I'd argue, was the best driver there this spring performance wise, advanced stats wise, and he's the winner of last year's fall race. He might be their best choice at winning that thing. And then Joey Logano is very competitive at Phoenix. The getting there is one part, but winning it is another. So when folks are saying, look, Kyle Larson's having an incredible season, and not to take anything away from that, of course he can be part of the championship at Phoenix. But if he is not a serious contender for the win at that racetrack, then he is not a serious title contender. And that's kind of how that is the contest. That is this game that NASCAR has created, is where he's in a situation where, yeah, he might win 5 races this year. He might win 8 races this year, but can we rightly say that he's a legitimate title contender? Not until we've seen him be good at Phoenix Raceway. So
we talked in the pre-show about like bottling up certain portions of different podcasts. And I think that one, what you just said, to be a contender for the championship, you got to be a contender at Phoenix, and or at least this year, and as long as we're at Phoenix, and that what's interesting about that, if they decide that they're going to start changing this thing up, either more and more often, I don't know, that's just Rusty starting a rumor or whatever, but if they're, I don't know what to say. That's pretty freaking sweet. And looking at what does Phoenix hold for folks, and do we have enough data to say one way or another? And perhaps we do. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of competitive. Weirdly, ever since Phoenix was named the host of the championship race, nobody thought that it could replace Homestead as this track where no one truly has an inherent advantage, but it has become that because all these different teams have spent a lot of money, a lot of time in research and development trying to understand that track. And when that happens, you're going to have a sort of parity that sees a lot of different teams dominate. We saw a lot of different drivers lead laps. We saw Joey Logano get out to a 4-second lead before hitting traffic this spring, but he did not win that race because he did not have the fastest car in that final stage. Mechanically, I think it was very interesting. It came down to something of a crew chief duel where, the 11 car was fast, the 22 car was fast, but all along the 19 car was progressing, getting faster as the race came to a conclusion. And that was it. That was reading the track, understanding what's going to come next, taking the feedback from the driver. In that sense, I know that might not have been the most exciting race that we've had this year, but in that sense, in terms of a competition, it's everything that you could ever want from a NASCAR race, because every player on the team was in play, whether it was crew chiefs, engineers making calls, whether it was the pit crew, and then ultimately it was the driver. I mean, that kind of is what you want from a NASCAR race. It offered a little bit of everything. So it has become that. No one really has a grasp at Phoenix. So right now I can see that there's a slew of really good teams that are good enough to mix it up, but it's going to come down to race 36 itself, where there's going to be some inner workings within the race and something's going to hit where others whiff.
Sherwin, before we move on to this weekend's racing, we got to talk a little bit of golf here, because if you'd have told old Rusty 20 years ago that who's one of these two people are going to win the PGA Championship 20 years from now, and it's the quote unquote old guy at 30 years old at that point, probably Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods, I would have hit you in the face and put all my money on Tiger Woods in that case. And here we are 20 years later. And I don't know, grown up as a golf fan and watching all that, I being a Tiger Woods fan, I always saw, I don't know, you always have like the hero and the villain, and I always saw Phil Mickelson as sort of the villain, but now he's outlasted everybody else. And I got to tell you, this last weekend when he won the PGA Championship at age 50, I was like, all right, well, I don't know. I guess I'm a Mickelson fan now. Like that's pretty cool. What do you think?
Well, I think with age comes appreciation. I think I've seen this very much so in myself as it pertains to NASCAR, and I'll singularize Kevin Harvick. Boy, didn't dislike Kevin Harvick for a long, long time. But then now, golly, in his early to now mid 40s, really just bring it on, as a driver against the same peers in a lot of ways. But being the old guy now, I can appreciate Phil winning. There's something interesting about it. He's on the precipice of being able to play on the senior tour if he would like to. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, I believe he will turn 50 in time to enter the senior U.S. Open if he so chose to do so. My money's on him playing in the U.S. Open. Not that he couldn't do both. I think that's in the cards, but because I believe Tom Kite's done that a couple times. But there's something interesting about it. And Phil was definitely my villain, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you were a Tiger Woods fan, in 97,
oh yeah,
you were not a Phil Mickelson fan.
Yeah.
And it's because they were so different. And then, of course, with the advent of all of this extra media coverage, social media, and everything else, you start to learn all these things about how fallible these humans are. And then Phil's story with his wife overcoming cancer. There's all these things that help you build this person up into something that you can absolutely respect beyond any reason why you might not have liked them as a competitor in the past. So, yeah, I mean, I was watching Saturday, and I watched Cup, who's the, I guess the prototype golfer now, the 6'3", 6'4", defensive end sized guy hitting the ball on, in the air 330 yards.
Right.
And on moving day, he picks up 4 strokes and 7 holes or whatever. I'm like, well, somebody's using moving day the way it's designed. And then he just had the same exact string in the reverse order on Sunday, and he basically just is out of it. And Phil just kind of persevered one little stroke at a time.
Yeah.
Until that he just, like you said, he outlasted everybody.
It's funny. You mentioned the prototype golfer there, because I had sent you a video this weekend. Went and played Topgolf with the fam. And, toward the end, it was just, all right, pick out the big club. I don't even care. I'm just going to swing as hard as I can and make something happen. And and I absolutely crushed my last shot. And it went dead straight. And, you're sitting there kind of measuring, okay, where did that ball land? Where did it hit first? And then where would it have possibly rolled to, et cetera? It probably hit at 200 yards. And rolled, to the back fence that they have, which is maybe 220, 250. On a good day, that was probably a 250-yard drive straight down the middle with everything I've got. And like you said, these guys are just 300 on the fly is just insane, Like that's a pitching wedge from where my ball stopped. So, anyway.
Well, you could blame it on Topgolf deadening the balls so they last longer. How about that?
I'll take any crutch that I can get. But, y'all, I crushed that ball. Oh, that was fun. Anyway, gentlemen, let's gas it up. Here we go. That's it. It is time for Memorial Day Madness, as I called it in the very scant show sheet that we have. No Monaco. Of course, last year they announced they moved it to the weekend prior, so we get to sleep in a little bit, watch the Indy 500, watch the Coke 600. Sherwin, what are you looking forward to?
Well, I got to digress at least for just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
We had some big doings in the old Monaco. The hometown kid, the Monaco Island habiteur, so to speak, Leclerc and Ferrari slipped in their own pile of horse manure and landed face first, won the pole and didn't even start the race.
Oh my gosh.
Because of a couple of different wild reasons. I'll let you go read about that because it's two very egregious mistakes. And not being like all in on the whole F1, but getting better at it, especially with watching the show. I promise you, anybody out there, if you haven't watched and driven to survive, it will cause you to want to pay attention to F1, even if it's still the same thing you think it is every week, which is, it's a whole lot of follow the leader just because those cars are so fast and it's so hard to pass. And Monaco is like the chief of all tracks where you can't pass.
Right.
But it wasn't without shenanigans, but yeah, you know what it'll do? It might reduce the number of naps I need. Now that we only have 1,100 miles to worry about instead of 1,367 or whatever it is.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see. I mean, we got Dixon on the pole, and we got people still saying crazy things like if he doesn't get a second Indy 500, then his career's not complete. And it's like, okay, let's go ahead and throw that out with the baby water. So yeah, I had to say something about Monaco since we aren't going to get to see it this weekend. I watched every lap of it last weekend.
Well done. David, what you looking forward to?
I'll be in Charlotte. So I'll be on the beat Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They've got 4 series competing this weekend. I think that'll be a lot of fun. There's practice, there's qualifying. It's, dare I say, very close to a normal NASCAR weekend. Better knock on wood when I say that. Yeah. But I'll be there attending the race. So I grew up in Daytona, and it really wasn't until I moved here to the Charlotte area. Now the track is, a short drive away, to really appreciate this weekend for what it is. I don't know if that has anything to do with the 600 miles that takes place at the Oval, but I think just the general feel that this is a weekend about motorsports is kind of nice. So it's sort of the weekend that the world, certainly when Monaco was a part of it, certainly the weekend the world pays attention to auto racing. I rather enjoyed that. I also like just leaving the racetrack and going straight home. It is very convenient and awesome. So that part I'm looking forward to. 600 miles, 4 stages in the Cup race is a slog. It's a lot. It's very long, but I'm here for it.
Well, you said it. A little bit, knock on wood or whatever we call it, back to normal. And it's time for Rusty's PSA. Y'all be sure to go get your vaccines. Everybody listening. We have recently, me and the wife, I can't remember, what was it? It might have been this last weekend when we went out to Athens, and our hosts out there, friends of ours, they said, well, yeah, we can go out to eat. What do y'all, where do y'all feel comfortable? What do you feel? And we look at each other. We're like, we'll go wherever. Like at this point,
yeah.
we're done up. We're ready to roll. So y'all go get your vaccines. And my 5G on the new phone has been just fantastic since the vaccine. So bonus. But anyway, gentlemen,
no, great. I echo that. I'm fully vaxxed and ready to roll. And mainly I've missed going into the garage. Like once the garage opens for Cup practice, a lot of I've got a lot of close friends on teams and even folks that I'm not really close to, but I do enjoy talking with. I've missed that, and that is feedback that makes me better as an analyst that I haven't had for over a year for some of these. For some, I'm able to send them a text, and for some, they just know me by my face. So to get back to some relative normal and do that, and to be able to cover the sport the best way I know how, this weekend's a pretty pivotal first step for that. So very excited for that.
Excellent. Well, folks, Sherwin, last week you picked Dinger, who finished 5th. I went out on a little bit of a limb, picked Austin Dillon, who finished 12th. So I'll go before you this time, but we always give it up to the special guest. So, David, who are you looking at for the Coke 600?
Oh, man. Okay, so here's the thing. Everyone's going to go this weekend assuming that Kyle Larson is the driver to beat, the car to beat. He ranks first in Pier at 550 tracks. He has the fastest car on 550 tracks, but I think this is going to be a tire wear race. And if it's minimal tire wear, I think that brings the field closer together. A pit stop can gain you track position. And then at that point, as we've seen in races in the recent past at Charlotte, it is very difficult to pass, especially with this rules package. So while I think Kyle Larson will win 2 stages, I will not pick him for the win. I think my pick will be Kyle Busch. He has won the last 2 Cup Series races using this particular tire combination. Last year at Texas and this year at Kansas. And this feels like a race, especially among the JGR4. If everything kind of points in that direction, he's the one ready and most capable to take advantage of that. So I'll pick the 18 at Charlotte.
There you go. Mine is way less scientific and way more from the consistency that we've seen, the longevity of this thing. I feel like you got to go with one of the, we'll call it veterans at this point, and I'm going with Denny Hamlin. As much as it might hurt me, hate me, whatever it is, but I see Denny Hamlin as somebody who will be there at the end, and we'll see. We'll see if he's contending for the win. So, Sherwin, up to you.
Yeah, so first and foremost, for everybody that is going to Charlotte, do not sleep on the 4/10 dirt mile on Friday night. Not to belittle anything that's going to happen on the big track, but that is one hell of a race card. It's a lot of fun. Make sure you bring your safety glasses and be prepared to drink dirt flavored beer. And enjoy the scenery because it's a little bit different than your standard NASCAR racing fan.
It's so much fun.
I was going to go with a driver whose last name begins with H. So I'm going to pick the sleeping giant to awake, Kevin Harvick.
There you go, SHR. But what I agree with again, just exactly what I was saying was your veteran drivers there and who can outlast in this Coke 600. I like it. With that, about time to start closing us down. Mr. David, why don't you tell the folks where they can find you? What's coming up next for you?
Lots of stuff. They can find me on motorsportsanalytics.com, NASCAR.NBCsports.com. I'm also at Forbes.com. But the easiest way to do it, you can find me on Twitter at DavidSmithMA, or you can just send me your email and I will send you all of my articles. You don't have to look for them. Send me your email address at motorsportsanalytics at gmail.com, and I will sign you up for a newsletter. It's just the articles emailed directly to your inbox. I don't need your clicks. I just want the article to be read and for the message to resonate. So do consider that if you're into this kind of stuff, and if you like hearing the sound of my voice. Positive Regression, the Motorsports Analytics podcast, drops every Thursday morning. It is hosted by me and Alan Cavana, and we call it the NASCAR podcast for the thinking fan. So please stop by if you are so inclined. We'd love to have you as a listener.
Excellent. Well, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Sherwin, close us out.
All right. Well, you can find us at PETM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me at Andrew L. Sherwin on Instagram and Pregame Engineer on Twitter.
There you go. And as always, Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace at Tailgate Mayor, PTMPodcast.com at PTM Podcast. He said it. Come see us. Come hang out. We can't wait to talk to y'all next week. Enjoy the long weekend. And, we'll look forward to a show next Tuesday. Y'all take care. All right, gentlemen, that's a wrap. David, awesome talking again.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
How's that whiskey doing?
Almost done, but yeah, I better not pour more. But I've probably been into bourbon for, God, it might be 10 years now. But just going around collecting here. North Carolina is the worst state to live in if you are a bourbon hunter, collector, anything, because the state controls liquor sales. They ABC. Own the ABC stores here in town. And something as simple as like Buffalo Trace, which is an incredible bourbon, is it's kind of everywhere, like in other states, especially up north, but that's on lottery here that they hold kind of every fall in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it's a hassle, man. It's tough. So it's when I'm traveling to Florida or traveling to a race, if there's, a worthwhile liquor store that seems to be independently operated, I'm happy to stop in. Weirdly, I think one of the best, I'll share it with your folks watching, the one of the best liquor stores I've been into was in Dawsonville, Georgia. I was working with RSMG at the time, which was a talent management agency, and we were going to recruit Chandler Smith. We went to his house. He is, to this date, the only driver whose house that I went to in order to recruit him as a client. And he lived outside of Dawsonville, a very small town called Talking Rock. But to get there, we drove through Dawsonville. There's the little town, the town square, and there's this just independently operated liquor store that was like deep. It was like warehouse vibes of you've got bottles on the floor and it's like your scavenger diving into things, looking at them, rare bourbons. I mean, it's incredible. We'd never get anything like that in North Carolina. It's impossible. So yeah, we've got the routine boring package stores here in North Carolina. So very tough stuff.
Yeah. Sherwin, have you had any problems finding the right liquor at the ABCs?
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to temper expectations. If you pay attention early in the month, they will always have right up front in the store, at least here in Mooresville, where I think they'll get like one box of maybe 5 or 6 different sort of rares, if you will, and you can claim a bottle right off the bat as soon as it's stocked. But once they're out, they're out. Mm-hmm. And there's not very exotic. So I mean, as you might can imagine, David, Rusty and I coming from Atlanta, I mean, we've got Total Wine. You can get, I mean, they've forgotten bourbons that they have. They're like, oh, I didn't even realize we had this anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just wall to wall, an entire section devoted to whiskey of all kinds. Of course, bourbon, but yeah, ABC, you kind of just have to know going in there that it's mainstream or bust.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. And for those, to echo what he said, to even like get your hands on some of the rare and like rare is a loose term, but like you kind of have to like know the store manager, and I can't operate at that level. Like you're almost have to guarantee like a monthly purchase nut that you have to hit just in order to even have these conversations. It's like, God, that's just not worth it. Like I think I'll just make this like a hobby or something if I'm on the road and just forget about North Carolina. So I've kind of given up on looking here. I'll leave that to the other folks, but
that's the thing.
Yeah,
it's got to realize is that okay, well now everybody's just bootlegging, and I mean, hey, we're in the Southeast, we're good at bootlegging, but
yeah,
I mean, come on, boys, like, give us our whiskey.
Yeah. So that's tough. I mean, you got to be at least, when you're on the road, especially more so when I was traveling for NASCAR, you had to be adventurous and just kind of look for these out of the way spots. And some of those out of the way spots are really good. And that's where you're going to find a bottle of Weller for the right price of something like $27 instead of paying a secondary market price of, your triple digits. Really, we live in America. We live in the home of bourbon. We should not be paying triple digits for bourbon in America, and you shouldn't, because it doesn't retail for that much. But once it hits that secondary market, what you said earlier, that scarcity, that's a killer. So that's what drives up the cost.
One thing we only kind of touched on in the show, and if you've got a couple minutes here, David, but what are your thoughts on? Did we prove out? And it's hard to say, but what are your thoughts on racing in the rain? Like I feel like there's been all this uproar about we should just slap some rain tires on there and have them run, woo! And now we see what happens. Maybe in the extreme case of that, but is there legs to running in the rain, or is this like all right, we tried it, see what happens? And I got to tell you, if we think of it as a spectrum, I'm sort of on that side of the spectrum that says, "Hey, we tried it. See what happens." Like we want real, quote unquote real, quote unquote regular racing back.
Yeah. So let's think about what has happened to NASCAR in the last 2 years. Their last 2 Daytona 500s have been postponed to rain. They had a Talladega race, which is a major TV ratings grab, postponed to rain. Bristol Dirt Race was supposed to be a big day in terms of ratings, postponed to rain. So in a sense, and even Austin, if you want to add that to the list, affected by rain. So NASCAR has not had good luck building around premier events because of inclement weather. I would say that exploring what it means to race in the rain and whether it's feasible and whether it even produces a product, because we don't know what that product looks like, but whether it produces a product that is good enough to try, I think they have to look into it because they've been bitten so often by inclement weather. There is no other sport that goes through this. Even baseball plays in light rain. And for the live attendance factor of this, they NASCAR wants folks in the stands for races, but it comes at a considerable cost because a lot of these folks are coming from certainly out of city, sometimes out of state. Hotel room prices are out of this world, especially around certain tracks, and to delay any of that is going to sour them forever on attending a race and perhaps even watching a race. So in that sense, if it's worth exploring, and no, it might not provide the ideal product, but if it's worth exploring, I think they've got to do it just to see what happens. And it's going to be painful. We're going to see a lot of mistakes and errors. We saw that this weekend, certainly at COTA. But if we can get to a point where, at least on a road course, where there isn't banking, and certainly if we're not putting drivers at risk because of poor visibility, then yeah, I think that's something that we have to try, because we're going to be dealing with weather for as long as stock car racing as a sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you look towards the fall, when it really, really starts to matter even more, when that Sunday postponement means potentially going up against Monday Night Football and things like that, a racetrack like a Martinsville. They ran a tire test yesterday at Richmond on a wet surface. And, why does Richmond make sense? Even though it's a very fast track. Well, this is the reason why it makes sense. Richmond fights noise ordinance more than any other racetrack. And to be able to complete that race on the day that it's supposed to run during a reasonable time of when it was supposed to run, that's probably a good idea to give that a go and see what happens. Martinsville is going to be tougher because it's concrete corners. Anybody that's ever driven on an interstate in a state that's got concrete interstates knows that concrete is a wildly different animal in the rain than asphalt, whether you have banking or not.
Yeah.
It tends to pool a lot more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's something they have to look at. I think it's something they really need to probably get some, they need to have a staff of civil engineers going, well, these are the things that we maybe could do and still accomplish this task.
Yeah, there needs to be a feasibility test just to understand what it is, especially if this is the next generation of NASCAR. It's going to be a schedule that includes a larger number of road course races. It's worth it. I mean, the juice would be worth the squeeze. You want people who want to tune into a race to be able to see a race, full stop. And being able to accomplish that is huge. And maybe, you know what? Maybe they can get the product, the racing product on the racetrack to a point where rain racing is something that people actually enjoy, because that is the case in other forms of motorsports. If the car is capable of withstanding most conditions, then there's an art to that. There are drivers who perform better in rain. I'd love to dive into the stats that suggest there are better rain drivers than others. I think there is something to be said there. But yeah, they've got to get it right, and it's going to take a lot of error because they've never done this before. So we're entering uncharted territory, but I think it's ultimately worth it.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm reading some of the stuff that's coming across the YouTube still, and there's people tend to, what's the right word? The fandom starts to sort of overtake what reality is at different stages of this process. Driving rain is an impossibility, and that's what we saw on Sunday. The only reason why we raced as long as we did is because with all those cars still out there, they were moving enough water around. We weren't seeing the just horrific hydroplaning we would have seen had we restarted that race. There was lightning moving in the area. I would strongly suggest that people follow the 2 NASCAR weather accounts because those guys are all over it. No, they were not going to run out of daylight, but they were going to run out of, usable time. And guess what can't be on the track when the cars can't be on the track? The dryers. If there's lightning, the dryers can't be out there either. So, I mean, there's all, and then there's the TV window. NASCAR wants its TV audience to leave knowing who won the race. And if that upsets people, I mean, that's just going to be part of it sometimes.
Yeah.
I lament what David had said, which is it seems to, whether it's bad luck or just the way the schedule is, it seems to affect some of our premier races lately. You mentioned Daytona and Bristol Dirt and COTA. If this were Richmond or this were Atlanta or this were Kansas or something, I feel like it would be, I would have a little more tolerance for, okay, well, yeah, let's try it. We've been here before. We know, we've seen this thing. But when it's like, COTA, I almost feel like that's like this sacred thing that, like, guys, we got to get this right the first time. But, maybe we don't. And I think the general consensus about the track, just like we talked about on the show, is we got to go back. We got to, but it almost feels like a do-over right now than it does we got to go back because that racing was so awesome. Like, we have to go back so that we know what actually racing at COTA is in NASCAR.
Yeah. And that's probably the primary reason I do want to go back because, as I said, I think that the drivers and teams are up for this. I think they're excited about Road America as well. And some of them actually have experience on that track, but these natural road courses, something about it. I mean, the Cup Series guys have an immense respect for drivers that can go out in sports cars or IndyCar and turn laps at these places. They want to be able to do that too, because they think that talent comes to the surface at these places, and to a large effect that's true. So to put on a right and proper show at a place like COTA, I think got to go back, got to see what that kind of racing is to understand what it is, because I think it can be something special.
Well, David, why don't we, we appreciate you being on, as always. And
always.
Don't want to spend your entire night here. And I do need to take a break anyway. But we're up on all the places. So y'all go download, enjoy, and appreciate you hanging out with us, David. This is awesome.
Yes, sir. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me. And anytime you want to throw the bad signal, I'll come running.
Right on. Right on. We'll
appreciate it, man. It's been fun.
Talk to your co-host soon here and see what he's got to say.
I bet he's got a lot to say.
Awesome.
I'll let him know. If you carve out the time, I'm sure he'll make it happen.
All righty. Thanks a lot, David. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you, guys.
See ya. And with that, YouTube folks, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to stop the stream now. Y'all are awesome. Peace out.